Hola, and welcome to Language Matters. Before we begin to learn our new words and expressions, let's review our last episode.
Don't worry about understanding every word. We just want you to hear the language in its context.
Me llamo José. En el primer episodio de Language Matters, oímos las expresiones hola, buenos días, buenas tardes y buenas noches. Hoy aprendemos las expresiones cómo estás y cómo está. ¿Cuál es la diferencia entre cómo estás y cómo está? Cómo estás es informal y cómo está es formal.
Both expressions mean how are you. So how do you know in which situation something is formal or informal? Usually, if you use the person's first name in conversation, it's an informal situation. If you say señor or señora, the equivalent of Mr. or Mrs., you're in a formal situation.
Let's try that out. Tell me in Spanish formal or informal for the following situations. Juan Carlos, Señora de Arenas, Señor Presidente, Holly. Perfecto. Juan Carlos es informal. Señora de Arenas es formal. El presidente es formal y Holly, su perra, es informal. Ahora, dígame si se dice cómo estás o cómo está en las situaciones. Juan Carlos, Señora de Arenas, Señor Presidente, Holly.
Let's review what we learned today. 1. Language is learned in context, and I'll be using more Spanish than just a few words. 2. Formal and informal situations use different language forms. 3. When we want to ask how someone is, we can say, ¿Cómo estás? Or ¿Cómo está?
Now that we reviewed, let's begin our new episode.
Hola, welcome to Language Matters. I'll be speaking more Spanish to you for this installment. We will show you the words you really need to know. Don't worry about understanding every word. We just want you to hear the language in its context. A word about today's lesson. The root word for today is llama. In Spanish, double L has been considered as a separate sound, much like the Y in yes. The sound is distinctive in Spanish according to what dialect of Spanish we speak. For the purpose of Anne Arundel's Language Matters, we will pronounce ya as Y to teach you. However, some speakers of Spanish pronounce double L as ja, as in Joe, or as ja, as in pleasure. Still, others say it as ya. So the basic patterns of Spanish llama may vary. Get ready to listen to some Spanish.
Me llamo José. En el segundo episodio de Language Matters, oímos las expresiones ¿cómo estás? Y ¿cómo está? La primera expresión, ¿cómo estás? Es informal y ¿cómo está? Es formal.
Hoy aprendemos las expresiones ¿cómo te llamas? Y ¿cómo se llama? ¿Existe la misma diferencia entre ¿cómo te llamas? Y ¿cómo se llama? Es decir, ¿cómo te llamas? Es informal y ¿cómo se llama? Es formal.
¿Cuál es la diferencia entre cómo te llamas y cómo se llama? ¿Cómo te llamas? Es informal y ¿cómo se llama? Es formal.
Both expressions mean what's your name. So how do you know in which situation something is formal or informal? Usually, if you use the person's first name in conversation, it's an informal situation, as we told you in the last episode. If you say profesor or profesora, the equivalent of teacher in the classroom, you're in a formal situation. Let's try that out. Tell me in Spanish formal or informal for the following situations. ¿Cómo estás? ¿Cómo está? Profesora. Una perrita.
Perfecto. ¿Cómo estás? Es informal. ¿Cómo está? Es formal. Profesora es formal y una perrita es informal. Ahora, dígame si se dice ¿cómo te llamas? O ¿cómo se llama en las situaciones? So what would you say to a young student? What would you say to an older woman? What would you say one friend talking to another? And what would you say if you're talking to Holly the dog?
Revisemos. Ahora, dígame si se dice ¿cómo te llamas? O ¿cómo se llama? En las situaciones. A young student, you would say, ¿cómo te llamas? To an older woman, you would say, ¿cómo se llama? One friend talking to another might say, ¿cómo te llamas? And talking to Holly the dog, you would say, ¿cómo te llamas? Let's combine the last two lessons. Use your knowledge of Spanish to respond to the dialogue prompts. Greet me. Ask me how I am. Ask me my name. Let's review what we learned today. 1. Language is learned in context, and I'll be using more Spanish than just a few words. You won't understand all of the words, but you will begin to understand. 2. Formal and informal situations use different language forms. 3. When we want to ask someone's name, we can say, ¿Cómo te llamas? Or ¿Cómo se llama? The word llama has different pronunciations, depending on where one lives. Es todo por hoy. Nos vemos la próxima vez en Language Matters.
Hola, and welcome to Spanish Language Matters. Before we begin to learn our new words and expressions, let's review our last episode.
For an informal situation, the phrase is, ¿Cómo te llamas? For a formal situation, we say, ¿Cómo se llama?
We'd like to review for you now some of the expressions you might know from previous episodes. What would you say in the following situations? If I say buenas noches to you, how do you respond? That's right. You probably remember that for greetings, you can respond in the same way. You can say buenas noches back to me. So, if I say hola to you, you can say hola back to me. If I say buenos dias to you, you can repeat to me buenos dias.
We would like to model a dialogue for you. Since you already know ¿Cómo estás? And ¿Cómo te llamas?, you could guess that the repeating word ¿cómo? Is a question word. A key to listening is to look for words that might be related. Since you already know estás, listen out for estoy. If you hear llamo, you might guess that it's related to llamas, a word you already know.
To help you out, Jennifer and I are going to model a dialogue for you. While listening to the dialogue, try to get the gist of what we're saying. Then, try to imitate the dialogue with someone in your own house. Here are some key words to listen for: the greeting, asking my name, and asking how I am. After the dialogue, we'll explain some of the answers.
Hola,
Hola,
¿cómo te llamas?
me llamo José. ¿Y cómo te llamas tú?
Me llamo Jennifer. ¿Cómo estás?
Estoy muy bien, gracias. ¿Y tú?
Estoy muy bien. Adiós.
Adiós, Jennifer.
So you heard a bit of language in that dialogue. Did you notice that in the question, ¿Cómo te llamas?, I answered, me llamo? To the question, ¿Cómo estás?, José answered, estoy. As a way of closing the conversation, we both said, adiós.
So, let's review some of the new expressions. ¿Cómo estás is the question, and estoy bien is the answer. ¿Cómo te llamas is the question, and me llamo is the answer. Adiós is one expression we use in Spanish to say goodbye. Es necesario practicar mucho en español. Now that we've reviewed, let's begin our new episode.
¿Dónde se habla español? Hola y bienvenidos a otro episodio de Language Matters. ¿Dónde se habla español? En este episodio investigamos dónde se habla el idioma. Spanish is spoken in over 20 countries around the world. Spanish comes from Spain on the European continent. Its capital is Madrid, and Spanish speakers came to the Western Hemisphere starting in 1492.
As you may know, Spanish is not spoken in the same way in every place. Do you remember when Jennifer told you about the many ways to pronounce the word llama, as in the expression ¿Cómo te llamas? That's not the only word pronounced differently. In some countries, the informal word for you is tú. In other countries, the word is vos. So you could say ¿Cómo estás tú? or ¿Cómo estás vos?
Don't worry about what is said where, but try to learn where we speak Spanish. Those of us who speak Spanish come from Spain, or the Caribbean, including Cuba, the Dominican Republic, or Puerto Rico. You will find people from these countries in Florida, New York, and Massachusetts. Because of people from these and other countries, the United States is now the 5th largest Spanish-speaking country.
In Central America, all of the countries except Belize speak Spanish. Looking at the map of Central America, here's a mnemonic device to help you remember the order of countries. The first letter will help you remember the order of the countries. The expression is, my goodness, eating hot nachos causes pain. So, that M for Mexico, G for Guatemala, E for El Salvador, H for Honduras, N for Nicaragua, C for Costa Rica, and P for Panama all stand for the countries.
Did you know that Puerto Rico uses the American dollar and that the dollar is widely used in Panama? If you'd like to read more Spanish, look for products in the supermarket. They will likely have information in Spanish as well as in English.
Spanish is spoken in most of the countries of South America, with the exception of Brazil, Suriname, French Guiana, and Guyana. The rest of the country speaks Spanish. So, let's look at the map of South America, and we can see Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, and Paraguay. The mnemonic device for South America is, very creamy eclairs provide bountiful calories and unwanted pounds.
So let's sum up what we've learned today. Although Spanish originated in Europe, Spanish is now spoken in over 20 countries of the world, including in the United States. Not everyone who speaks Spanish speaks it in the same way. You were given some ways to remember which countries speak Spanish. If you're interested, look at the names of the states in the U.S. Can you tell which ones come from Spanish?
Bueno, es todo por hoy. Nos vemos la próxima vez en Language Matters. Gracias y adiós.